welcome to Australia India Institute Delhi's webinar on Yoga for a Sustainable World. Today's chair and moderator of the session is Ms. Tanya Spisbah, Director of the Australia India Institute in Delhi. To our audiences, please feel free to post your questions in the chat section below your screen, and our panelists will take them forward in the discussion later. Ms. Tanya Spisbah is a strategist, negotiator, advocator, passionate about impact for a sustainable planet. She is renowned for her work on Australia-India relations, particularly with respect to inclusive sustainable development. As director of the Australia-India Institute in New Delhi, she promotes bilateral research, collaboration for sustainable development, and has published and is a frequent speaker on contemporary Indian foreign public policy in a multipolar world. A former career diplomat with the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for more than a decade, Ms. Spisbah served at the Australian High Commission, New Delhi, specializing in health and technology diplomacy, sustainable economic growth, climate policy, and governance. Previous roles include placements in Moscow and Baghdad and negotiating trade agreements with economic partners, including China, South Korea, and ASEAN. Tanya has represented Australia in the WTO, APEC, and other international fora, and was formerly a lawyer with Minister Ellison. In addition to qualifications in philosophy, economics, and law, Tanya is a certified yoga teacher. Yeah, over to you, Tanya.
Thank you very much, Muskan, for that introduction. And I'm so delighted to be hosting this panel today in celebration of International Yoga Day, which will be this Sunday, the 21st of June, the winter or the summer solstice, depending on where you are in the world. I really wanted to host this session with this particular incredible panel, in part to highlight the breadth, depth, and applicability of yoga, which I see as incredibly powerful and relevant, no matter where we are or what we do in life. Currently, we are all living through 2020, one of the most interesting, unique, testing and challenging years, I think, of our existence for most of us, peppered with natural disasters, political clashes, pandemics, and other calamities. We've all seen quite a plethora of news, a lot of it negative, and I thought this would be a perfect reminder to let us know we don't need to focus on the immediate antagonizer. We can focus on the world we want and the world we can be part of and the world we wish to live in. So the inspiring speakers we have today will certainly bring us into that direction. As you would have heard from the introduction that Muskan generously gave me, my background is multilateralism, negotiation, and collaboration. And I believe that yoga can certainly be part of this world. So we might have seen Prime Minister Modi, for example, in his recent bilateral calls to both Angela Merkel in Germany and President Macron in France, speaking about yoga as not only part of a human-centric multilateralism, but also as part of a movement towards better health as well. So better physical health and for immunity. So I believe it's really quite a powerful thing to reflect upon. The other reason why I think it's good to talk about this is because yoga and even the International Yoga Day has been politicized, and it's also been thought of as a religion or part of a religion. But what I want to do with this panel is to make it clear that yoga is for everyone and has applicability as a discipline in its own right for connection. So today I have with me Mansi Mahajan, who is the founder of House of Kapaali, Dr. Bharti Chhibber, an associate professor at the University of Delhi, Swami Pujan, a psychologist, Hatha Yoga professional and teacher, Ursula Margharita, the founder of Yoga and Biodynamics and also of The Lazy Buddha, and Amisha Ghadiali, founder of The Future is Beautiful. So without any further ado, I'd love to introduce Mansi Mahajan. She in her own right is an award-winning entrepreneur and is a wellness evangelist, self-described, and a soulpreneur. She is running the House of Kapaali, which is a beautiful boutique bed and breakfast in just outside of Delhi, but celebrates experiential wellness. She is also leading with her inspiration and consciousness as part of the Women's Economic Forum. In addition to all of this, she also runs her own skincare product called Manastay. And without further ado, please, Mansi, take us forward on soulpreneurism, yoga, and business.
Thank you so much, Tanya. If I can just begin by saying this is absolutely delightful, and to be in the company of such amazing, illustrious speakers. And thank you, have so much gratitude to you, my beautiful soul sister, Tanya, across borders and boundaries for, having us meet in the celebration of technology and in celebration of course, yoga. So if I can just get us to tune in as we spend, these 75 minutes together, if we can just tune ourselves to our breaths, to each other, just in the chanting of one Om, if you don't mind. And I would love for the audiences to join us so we can send out this collective vibration as we can if we can close our eyes for a moment and just tune into this magical present moment in celebration, in gratitude, and in deep and utter harmony to our breath. Inhaling deeply from our roots up. Let's chant one Om. Staying with the vibrations just for a couple of seconds. Coming into this beautiful energetic shift. When we're ready, we can open our eyes and arrive here in flesh and spirit. So like I was saying that, and in fact, what you were saying, Tanya, I would like to pick it up right from where you left us, that we find ourselves juxtaposed in the midst of very interesting times where there's a lot of unraveling. And I think that it is a time where there hasn't been a better time in our lifetimes as a humanity as a whole, for us to come together in collective consciousness. And I want to begin with that, because that in the yogic tradition, we call the rise of the Shakti, right? It's the rise of that deep wellspring of creative energy that's resident in each one of us. This is the same thing, what we call prana in the yogic tradition. It's our vital life force. What we call chi in the Chinese traditions. What we call mana in Hawaii. What we call ka in ancient Egypt, or ki in Reiki practices. So I think this is the time that we come into the actual feeling, the visceral experience of the anubhava, of the Shakti. That's a whole lot of Sanskrit in one sentence. But as we go through the churning, this is a time where we can really introspect and use the yogic tradition to help us begin the process of catharsis. And once that begins, in the midst of the crisis, I think it's so powerful to really come out with it as we go through I like to think of what we're going through, and collectively, you and I, all of us put together, going through this stage of the chrysalis. And this is what yoga teaches us, right? It's about going within. As we restructure and reimagine our world, we are ready to unfurl our wings as we expand into the butterflies that we're hopefully eventually going to turn up as. Coming to my topic, soulpreneurism. I think that's an idea that has been with me for the past decade or so, like you generously mentioned, Tanya, thank you for that. I run a boutique bed and breakfast, which is a wellness-oriented space. I am so fortunate to be able to facilitate yoga to people and corporates across the world for the past decade as well. And the sheer gratification that it brings by helping people getting out of their BMWs. So this is the idea that I propagate. I'm on a mission to help people get out of their BMWs. Mind, body, mind, and worlds, and really start to drive from that heart-centered space, right? And when we make that shift, and when you see that visceral shift happen from driving from the brain, the mind, shifting it 18 inches down to the heart center, absolute magic, absolute revelations, infinite possibilities. So when we come to soulpreneurism, I have two questions that I'd like to encourage anyone who's on this journey to the idea of being a soulpreneur. Is two questions need to be answered and addressed. The first, and super relevant, is that where are you with the sustainability? Is it built into the scaffolding of your structure, mind, body, spirit, or is it a CSR afterthought? So is it really a part of the DNA and the RNA of what you're doing, what you want to do? Is what you're doing completely putting out this earth, Tanya's words, earth nourishing, deeply soulful an experience for all? And the second one, which brings me to the point of the 3 Ps. Does my passion fuel purpose and prosperity in equal proportion? And this is, I think, the most important, because if we're aligned with our higher purposes, with our hearts, transcending from the mind into the heart, I think there is a certain level of equanimity that is created through the enterprise, through the entrepreneurism. So even even for time immemorial, we have seen in the Guru Shishya tradition, right, in the yogic traditions, in the teaching traditions of the East, there is a concept called Guru Dakshina. It's the concept of offering back what you receive multifold, in the honor of it. So I think this is the same concept we deploy when we talk about commercial enterprises, which are socially focused, which are soulful, which are earth nourishing, and nourishing you at the spirit level, most importantly, because there's the concept of interconnectedness. Because in yoga, we celebrate abundance. So the enterprise factor or the exchange factor is only an energetic exchange in celebration of each one of us being just forms of energy. Everything we do is an exchange of energy. So if you were to talk about the preneurism in the soul, so that's really just an energetic exchange. It's a respect, it's a giving back of what you receive, creating this really beautiful triangle. Thinking of a sacred triangle, I'd like to bring out a concept which is called the interlinked prosperity. So what is this? It's basically, again, that sacred triangle with you right on the top, with offering everything that you're doing, going out, yoga, wellness, whatever it is that you do, and it's going out. On one end is your receivers who you're offering this to. And on the other end is your team that is helping you, is your foundation that's helping you pursue what you do. Creating this interlinked prosperity. The prosperity of me is the prosperity of you. So this is really what I wanted to talk about, that, with this beautiful focus of passion meets purpose, passion meets profit. No shame in that. I think we need to own what we do, because it's in the sense that it's all interlinked, and it's what, links our actions to the universe, to each one of us. We're intrinsically connected. Like you said, in the breadth, in the depth, in all that we do. And if what you do is what you love, it's a celebration of existence itself. So much more reasons to celebrate, right? So I think I want to leave us just with a closing thought, which is from our Vedas again, which is Aham Brahmasmi. Aham Brahmasmi. I am the universe. If what I do comes from a place of heart and soul, it comes from the idea of helping everyone achieve their greater good, their best self, their infinite potentiality. I think we all hit bullseye, the heart bullseye. So I'm the universe, and the universe is in me, and all of that is intrinsically interconnected, anatomically, chemically, in more ways than we could fathom. So thank you, Tanya. I'm going to leave you with that and all of us.
Thank you, Mansi. Now, you brought up a lot of strong yogic practices right from Sanskrit traditions, and I think Swami Pujan will speak about that a little bit later. But I do like the way that you focused on both celebrating abundance, which is, I think, a very important aspect no matter what we're doing in life, and certainly passion meeting profit, in the sense that one can earn money and sustain oneself, but also be mindful of both connectedness and sustainable practices. So there's no harm in self-sufficiency through sustainability. And I think that's a core message. And as we heard in Prime Minister Modi's discussions with other foreign leaders, the idea that you can bring a sense of human responsibility to international order through that type of connection, I think, is crucial. I'd like to use that as a segue now to introduce Dr. Bharti Chhibber. Dr. Bharti has, in fact, this very background. She is an associate professor at the University of Delhi, also, I think, founding The Diplomatist. She has a strong experience already in multilateralism, and particularly writing on the Indo-Pacific, ASEAN and APEC, and certainly a very well-renowned academic and scholar in international relations. She also has expertise in yoga and the environment, and applying yoga to environment and sustainability. So Dr. Bharti Chhibber, please, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you, Tanya, for that very generous introduction. Namaskar, good afternoon and good evening to all. Thanks, Tanya, of course, for inviting me here to share my views, and it's absolutely great to be here. As I have about 8 minutes, I'll be briefly highlighting some important aspects. When we talk of yoga and its benefits, well, they are universal and are not confined to any particular area of people. However, as I come from the land of yoga, I recall the famous words of Mahatma Gandhi. The nature has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. Well, nature has always been very vibrant, giving, resilient to a large extent, and India also takes pride in its ancient civilization and strong cultural heritage. When we talk of culture, it protects and nurtures nature. Well, we worship sun, wind, land, trees, plants, water, which is the very basis of human survival. Likewise, we also respect and conserve our wildlife, which are part of our cultural ethos. For example, there are some written texts in Sanskrit, Pali, and other languages, which provide significant detail. We have a scripture called Vishnu Samhita in Sanskrit language, and it contains some directions which talk about how to deal with biodiversity conservation. At the same time, we also see that at the global level, owing to unsustainable development activities of mankind, rapid urbanization, overpopulation, deforestation, wildlife and wildlife habitats are increasingly endangered. Global warming, pollution, climate change, they actually pose very serious threats to flora and fauna. And likewise, acidic rain is also destroying animal and plant ecosystems. Human and animal conflict also occur when animals, they actually damage crops and property because of the encroachment in their habitat as humans encroach in forest land. So it's critical that we restore this balance and mitigate environmental consequences of unsustainable development. And this is what yoga teaches us. Yoga teaches us to be content, care for nature, instead of being materialistic and live in this concrete jungle. It makes you one with nature, one with ecosystem, and one becomes conscious of one's surroundings. One understand and appreciate and feel thankful to the environment, water bodies, lake, wetlands, and plants. So yoga is a way of life. People who practice yoga, they feel empowered and are more likely to adjust their behavior to help the community and environment. Yoga as a discipline, it has certain ethical principles which one can use to guide their daily life. And one of these principles is ahimsa, which is non-violence. And as we see, more and more people are becoming vegetarian, going towards a sattvic diet. So when we do yoga, physical and mental change, it starts happening. It may be very subtle in the beginning. We feel a detachment from the material world. We become more aware of the air we breathe, water we drink, chirping of birds. It's both an inward and outward journey, which can be manifested in terms of our love and respect for nature, our environment. I recall Vivekanand also mentioned that lifestyle and consumption patterns of human beings can actually affect the environment. So it is yoga which helps us in letting go of our attachments. For example, if you're going to buy the latest gadget, which is not reusable, after perhaps becoming more conscious, we'll be buying something or reuse our gadgets, So we'll not discard them, which will end in landfills or create pollution leaching into the water or the underground soil. So what yoga teaches us is that we are all connected in some way, and we need to be mindful of our actions. So one needs to start practicing yoga to take healthy decisions in our lives. It makes us more sensitive towards the world. And we realize that there's a shared energy and common life force. We learn to respect other living beings and understand that every animal and living species has equal rights to live on this planet and flourish. Yoga provides us with a set of guidelines and framework for managing our needs for global change. It reduces dependence on medicine, cure anxiety, depression, and also enhance our immune system, bringing about a lasting peace. And we consciously make an effort to change. Through yoga, we realize that it's our duty and responsibility to look after the environment upon which we depend for survival, which is swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is a process of self-study or self-analysis, which leads us to deeper understanding of our nature. We have different forms of yoga, and these are different vehicles towards enlightenment, towards awakening. For example, mantra japa. Mantra japa is a very effective and spiritual progress. Om, as we begin our session today, as the earlier speaker began the session with that, it actually embodies the divine energy, the Shakti, and has three very important characteristics: creation, preservation, and liberation. This mantra and its vibration, they're considered very highly spiritual and a creative power. It purifies the environment around you and creates positive vibration. It not only benefits the person who's chanting, but it also benefits the people because the vibration flow. And it cleanses both the internal and the external environment. I recall last year in United Nations on June 21st, when we were celebrating the International Yoga Day, in the UN General Assembly Hall, hundreds of diplomats, they actually chanted Om, which actually symbolizes that it promotes sustainable practices like inclusive green growth, conscious consumption, and more lifestyle, sustainable lifestyles. It also teaches us about holistic vision of the world. We all are one. We all can survive together. We need to protect each other, encouraging us to live in harmony with ourselves, our society, and our nature. We also have another form of yoga, which is the Yog Mudra. And it has been scientifically proven that Yog Mudra, which is in which you use your hand, eyes, and body gesture based on the principle of Ayurveda, actually heals and redirects energy. And the three qualities I mentioned earlier, it combines with the five elements which we human beings as well as the nature composed of: fire, air, space, earth, and water. And a balanced state of these five elements actually show the effective working of body and mind. What we feel inside is manifested outside. We become selfless from being selfish, concerned about nature in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, we use carpool, public transport, we prefer walking, and we go for plantation of trees and also not to litter around. So based on these 5 tattvas which we are made of, again, when we leave our body, we become part of the nature. So realizing this thing, we also have other scriptures like Bhagavad Gita. Now in Bhagavad Gita, which is a very famous Indian text, composed of about 700 verses, written long time back in 3rd or 4th BCE, actually as part of Mahabharata. And in this chapter 23 to 40 of Bhishma Parv, they actually are in the form of a dialogue between Arjun and Shri Krishna, in which Arjun seeks guidance from Shri Krishna. And Shri Krishna actually talks about how the method of yoga is a method of connecting the individual, the Jivatma, with the divine consciousness. That is the Paramatma. Amalgamation of the spiritual Atman with the Brahman. Amalgamation of human beings with the nature, And Bhagavad Gita has many forms of yoga, but I'll just talk about 2 and 3. One is karma yoga. That is the yoga of duty or action. Again, we have to perform our karma towards the nature. Similarly, Gyan yoga. That is the yoga of knowledge, where we enlighten ourselves, become conscious of our surroundings. Bhakti yoga, where we actually give emphasis on the power of devotion, love, and our relationship with nature. So all these actually talk about important aspects, not of the renunciation, but also performing your karma towards the nature, taking care of the nature. Finally, we also have Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which is a collection of 196 Sanskrit sutras on theory and practice of yoga. Again, compiled prior to 400 BCE. And these Yoga Sutras of Patanjali has been translated in many languages, which highlight its importance. It also talks about Ashtanga Yoga with niyamas, contentment, ahimsa, what has to be in harmony of mind, word, action, to conduct one's speech, mind according to truth. Our action towards the nature should be for the protection of the nature, not against.
Thank you, Bharti. We'll have to finish up pretty soon so that we can let the others speak.
Okay, fine. I'll just mention one last point.
The last sentence, please. Yes, please.
Yes. The last point is, as an academic, I would just say that we have been doing lot of initiative like Vanshalas where teach our students, how to be part of, be self-reliant, protect the nature, part of self-sufficient. And so I would say that yoga is a part of our life. And I'll just wind up with a very famous Sanskrit shloka, that is Astu Om, Astu Ma Sat Gamya, Tamso Ma Jyotir Gamya, Mrityur Ma Amritam Gamya, Om Shanti, 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 which basically translate that we have to lead ourselves from unreality to truth, from darkness to light, from death to immortality and self-realization and peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bharti. And it was such a rich array of ground that you covered that I'm sure there'll be many, many questions for you as well. And starting, I think, with quoting Gandhi, and reminding us that there is enough for everyone is a really, again, conscious and inclusive and relevant principle by which we can all live by. And I'm also noting the fact that you referenced the Om that was chanted by diplomats all over the world in the UN General Assembly, which again demonstrates that spirituality, connectedness does not actually have to be separate from diplomacy, business, multilateral negotiation, or even security discussions, but can help us into a type of third eye thinking to move above the issues of the immediate threats to think about the world we want. You also touched on yoga and its curing of anxiety and depression, and the point of ahimsa and doing no harm. I think that's the perfect segue to take us to Swami Pujan. We're very fortunate to have Swami Pujan with us, who is not only a very experienced Hatha Yoga teacher, but also a clinical psychiatrist as well, and can talk about the importance of the psychology and the mind and the impact that yoga can have. He also has a history in philosophy of yoga, and I'm sure can expand on the point of ahimsa and do no harm. So Swami Pujan, please, over to you from Australia. Great to have you here.
Yes, and I'm aware I'm the first man and I'm the first Westerner. So I'll give a Western perception of that subject, and it might be controversial. So, you know, keep your comments till later, please. As I said, I'm a clinical psychologist, and just two stories to start it off. After I finished my studies, I was in private practice, and a man came in. He was unhappy about his life. He was unhappy about his marriage. His children left him, and he came in and said, "Please fix me." And that changed my perspective, because I asked myself, what is a healthy human being? And at that time when I studied, we only had Freudian examples, and there was no understanding of what it actually means to be healthy. We only were taught neurotic behaviors. So I looked into the East. And at that time, and we're talking a long time ago, sort of the beginning of the 80s, Buddhism was very strong. And so I looked into Buddhism. I looked what was happening there. And there I went into the yoga philosophy, and suddenly it all opened up, because when we read the Bhagavad Gita, it's very clear what a healthy human being is and how to get there. So I then moved into yoga philosophy, even though it is not a philosophy. Philosophy means the wisdom for truth, but yoga is actually a practice. And a practice for what? For moksha, for self-realization. But now what happens? The West developed psychology, and I have to admit, it's grown a lot. We have now something like positive psychology that focuses on the creative aspects of us that actually makes us happy, and so on. We bring quantum physics in, so it evolves. And then, of course, the art of the hard problem of consciousness. We're looking into what is actually consciousness and how to get there. But still, it is a dualistic way of thinking. And then we have the East. We have yoga. Like I said, yoga is a tool for self-realization. But what happens now in both ways? From the Western point, there is a way of a lot of Western people to bypass spiritual bypass, we call it. It's a new word, yeah. To not look at their psychological problems, but go straight into deep yogic meditation. And this won't work. This will affect you later on in life. You cannot jump through steps. So I looked into this, and then around the 1980s, 81, I saw a very interesting YouTube video about the Dalai Lama talking about the leading Buddhist teachers at that time, Western Buddhist teachers in Dharamsala. And the Western teachers are starting explaining, and they say, oh, we don't feel really good enough to teach it, and we have difficulty, and so on. So after a while, the Dalai Lama said, look, you talk all about having not enough self-confidence and you feeling not good enough. Is everybody feeling that way? And the leading teachers, they all raised their hands. And then he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, we don't even have a name in Tibetan language for not being good enough, for low self-esteem. That word actually doesn't exist. So he said, what you need to do in the West, first you need to go through therapy. And I cannot emphasize that enough. For the Western mind. And of course, when I talk about the Western mind, I'm only talking about a conditioned Western mind. The Indian mind, let's say the Eastern mind, becomes more and more Westernized. When what was the name? When Mansi said, "Step out of the BMW," I mean, I really had to smile, because BMW obviously is a German car, and if you would have said that 30 years ago, I would have said that doesn't sound very Indian, you know. So the Indian mind becomes westernized as well. But let's stay with the Western mind. So first we need to clarify. We have to have a healthy sense of self. A healthy sense of self, particularly if you have repeated patterns coming up, they need to be looked at. And now from a yogic perspective, you all know the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. They don't talk about bulimia. You know, they don't, the yamas and niyamas don't mention anxiety. They mention the basics from a healthy, mature mind. Now, ethical components like non-violence, truthfulness, and so on. But first, you have to develop a strong, mature identity before you go into the higher forms of Raja Yoga, for example. So when we now jump into the Indian understanding, I have to unfortunately tell you that yoga is not Indian, because yoga deals with the mind, and the mind and the ahamkara, the ego, and so on, is neither Western or Eastern. You know? We all have the same mind. Like even Hatha Yoga, we have a physical body. What India contributed was the total exploration of the mind through the channeled wisdom of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, probably the greatest spiritual written thesis there is. But the mind in itself is neither West nor East. The Indians just categorized it and focused their whole identity on that spiritual exploration. I mean, Sigmund Freud only created something like the subconscious mind, is it maybe 120 years ago, whereas India knew about samskaras and vasanas, 3,000 years ago. So there's a lot of history in that. But now something happened. When the West got hold of the Indian idea, there is a certain form of merger that is really not healthy. Yoga is not about stretching. You know, we know from the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it's just the third limb. It says, Stiram Sukham Asanam. Yeah. So, and what is the asanam? The asanam is a sitting posture. And why do we sit? Because to quieten the mind through meditation. And why do we want to have a quiet mind? Not because to have less anxiety, not to be more relaxed and peaceful, not for all these aspects. We want to have a quiet mind to inquire who is the one who is watching the mind. Self-inquiry. But what happens now is that the West took the essential aspects of yoga and brought Western romanticism in there. You know, when you look into the yoga in the West, it is very different to Krishnamacharya's yoga he created 100 years ago. You know, there's no green juice, Lululemon pants. I mean, if you see these old yogis in their Iyengar as well, in their little, little napkins, you could say, and then you look at a Western Californian yogini, very different. So this is a big subject, and I just want to really to start the thinking process. You know, yoga is a radical transformation of the mind, and the aim is moksha. The aim is not just happiness or contentment. It is a radical realization of our true nature, which is non-dual. So this urgency or this intensity or this focus, I feel, is missing. In the West, we need first to create a mind that is able to absorb the teaching, and then we need to actually get the practices that we call yoga through the 4 yoga paths, and then together we can actually become a whole human being, what the Jews call a mensch. So I hope that this newfound realization of a way out of our suffering and the tools that we have to get out of our suffering, that these yogis gave us, and they are universal. Like I said, they're not East or West, they're universal tools. I hope they don't get washed away by a romanticizing, body conscious, watering down of the essence of what Krishna tells Arjuna in the battlefield. Wake up, surrender to me, and then you will be free. I mean, just to bring it together. So as you can see, it's a huge subject. I can keep on talking. I just got sort of energy for it. But let's see if there are some questions coming up. And I just want to thank Tanya again to invite me. I was quite surprised that you bring me in, but I'm so happy you did. So namaste, everyone.
Thank you very much, Swami Pujan. That was excellent. Honestly, I think what I'm really wanting to do here is celebrate the diversity of yoga. Each one of you has a very unique perspective to bring, and I think bringing you together really highlights just how diverse yoga is, but also how applicable it is. And you're highlighting in particular that philosophy is a wisdom for truth, but that yoga is in fact a practice and something in which will require radical transformation, including transformation of the mind, I think is really key. Transforming of the mind is often what is required as well, no matter what age we are, to create new neural pathways for connecting to planet and to others, as we were discussing, but even to ourselves and to our own bodies. So this for me is the perfect segue to introduce Ursula Margharita. Ursula was born in Switzerland, now lives in Spain, but has been traveling the world, and I actually met her in India. She chose to start as a dancer as her life path, and through dance and movement became a body therapist. Through a body therapist, really focused on yoga and awareness as part of her yoga teaching, and has gone from a lazy Buddha concept to now founding yoga and biodynamism. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, Ursula.
Hello, everyone. Wow, just made it. I'm sorry to have missed some of your talks. Well, I was thinking about what I'm going to present here, and since I'm not really a talker but a mover, I would just like to do a little whole body meditation with all of you out there. Just maybe to illustrate what in my work, how do I enter into that field of wholeness? That's my, like, wholeness in the sense of, I like to Swami Pujan. Really sorry I missed that talk, but the Stiram Sukham Asanam is, I'm not into the philosophy, I'm not even like a classical yogi, I'm a mover, but I try to find that wholeness of stability, of softness, of strength, of all directions through observing my body. So we have not so much time, but I would just like you to ask to sit comfortably, and just take your hands and hold. One hand is holding the other hand, and really rest that hand. I'm gonna really rest that hand, that one hand like a baby in the other hand. And just enter into that observing state. You can watch that hand, you can soften that hand, resting in the other hand. And you soften the skin around, and you soften the hand underneath, holding. And you just observe your breath. And then you softly let go of that holding and separate the two hands and hold them next to each other. And you just observe the different feeling. And you change. And you hold the hand who was holding. And let that hand soften. You observe. And you observe the hand who is holding, and let that hand soften. And you separate the hands. And feel. And then you change and you hold again the other hand. And then you travel to the elbow. And you feel the whole hand and the forearm and the elbow softening, grounding. And then you go to the other arm who is holding, who has a slightly different dynamic. And you observe the hand, the forearm, the elbow. And then you feel both elbows, both forearms, both hands, and observe the difference in the dynamic. One is letting go, dropping down. One is holding up, giving support. And then you loosen and separate the arms and feel. Maybe there is a different feeling now, more the hands, the forearms, the elbows. And you change and you hold the other hand. You go into that feeling of dropping the forearm, dropping the hand, and with the other side holding and supporting. And then you go to the shoulders. Allowing that force melting and holding, translating into the whole of the arm, into the shoulders, and allowing the shoulders to use that to drop downwards and backwards. As you feel deep inside the spine, moving upwards. You just connect with the breath. And then you soften the holding and soften the resting and separate the arms and just feel the different consciousness in the body. And you change once more the arms, the hands holding and supporting, and rest again. This time it almost happens by itself. And you just observe the spine. And the ground. The feet, if you have them on the ground. The pelvis, sit bones. The hands supporting and dropping. And then you separate your hands. And you just look at those hands and you bring them together. And in between, in here, there is a little bird, a little flower, something very dear and very soft and very vulnerable. And you just hold it dearly. And you bring it to your heart. Thank you. Namaste. So I hope that has just served of bringing us into the here and now.
Ursula, thank you so much. That was beautiful. And you brought your very gentle, nurturing, and incredible energy with you. I almost wish I'd invited you to go last in a way, because you've brought us into this very peaceful and connected space. But I think, as Swami Pujan was saying before about waking up and the call to wake up, in bringing us down and in cooling us down, you've actually woken us up. And so in that spirit, I would love to move to our final speaker today, which is Amisha Ghadiali. She is an incredibly well-rounded individual, an award-winning social entrepreneur in her own right. She has had demanding roles in the political space, doing political campaigning, sustainability, and has also been part of the tech startup worlds as well. Truly appreciating what it is to live a high-pressure lifestyle, this brought Amisha into a space of deep knowledge and the understanding that a sustainable living and mindfulness is key. So she's transformed the high energy, octane, exhaustion level of living a high-tech and political career life, and brought with her that wisdom into shaping a life that is truly beautiful. And she's here to speak with us today about her own podcast that she's launched and her own series of work, thinking and really reflecting on the future is beautiful. The future is in our hands and it is beautiful. Thank you, Amisha, please.
Thank you, Tanya. How long would you like me to speak for? Just because I see that we're already at the finished time.
So we said we'd go for 75 minutes. If you can speak for your 10 minutes, we might just be a bit crunched for questions. And then if panelists are willing, we can send questions out to individuals if we don't get time to go through them all. So please take 10 minutes.
Okay, wonderful. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And it's always funny kind of hearing that biography, because that's quite an old one. And it feels like a long time ago since I was busy and stressed and high pressured after I liberated myself from that way of being. And it reminds me of what Swami Pujan was saying, of this kind of notion about how in the West yoga has sort of become this thing of like de-stressing and like, you know, almost like a tool that allows you to kind of stay in the hamster wheel. So it's like you end up using your yoga and your meditation in order to sustain a system that actually does not care for us, a system that is based off our oppression and has us kind of without that real space to go deeply into who we are. But as somebody with Indian heritage that has spent a lot of time in India and has also lived in the UK, and I have studied yoga and spirituality with all kinds of teachers, I feel very heartened that although there is a lot of this kind of top-up yoga, there are also many deep practitioners, and that they are, you know, tantrikas. They are the household practitioners that are also perhaps with demanding jobs and with families, and that are deeply committed to their yoga as well. And for me, really, the path of yoga is a path of self-mastery. It's a path of getting to know yourself. It's a path of freeing yourself from the samskaras of your past, of your ancestry, of your karma, and of the societal conditioning in which we live. And I feel that the more of us that are able to go through this process, and I do believe it's a lifelong process. I don't believe that anyone has done it exactly. Like, of course, there are some masters, but many of them were born masters, and so I feel like we go through these cycles, and it's like we might go through a cycle where we get to that kind of place of rebirth where we feel very like energized and very clear, very in tune with our true nature and our purpose. And then if we're committed to keep on growing, we will inevitably go into another death cycle and then out into rebirth again. And so I find the path of yoga to be one that is continuous and full of surprises as we're taken through ever deeper revealing spirals of ourselves, and then through that we're able to see the world in which we live more clearly and get some perspective, and then through that perspective we're able to show up in a way that creates the kinds of changes that we want to live in a world that is more tilted towards sustainability, towards regeneration. And so in this process that we go through, I feel it's about each of us being called to be a leader, and the tools and the practices and the wisdom that yoga gives us is that kind of guidebook in how to tune into that part of us which knows, like that part of us which can find its natural place in the greater tapestry of life and the society and community in which we find ourselves. There's this Sanskrit word pratibha, which I love, which is kind of like intuition, but it's very much about being in harmony with the greater. So it's not like, you know, some of this kind of new age yoga, which is like, okay, like I'm gonna use my intuition to get a really cool car, like the BMW. But it's like, no, I'm gonna like use my intuition to find my own, like my part, like the threads in that I'm gonna weave in the fabric of a future, and a future that is beautiful. And so one of the ways that yoga really helped me to do this, like on a very personal level, was that kind of being very like highly like Western educated, and then like working in politics and in sustainability and tech startups and all of this. It's very like brain focused and of course creative intelligence, but also just like default mode network thinking, like of kind of just being in that kind of constant flurry of like making decisions, and also that space of needing to kind of win and prove ourselves all the time, and you know, and have authority and make people feel confident in us. And one of the things that happened for me as I really like delved deeply into my yoga was that I realized that didn't really work for me. It was this kind of energy of dominance as intelligence rather than connection as intelligence. And so I began to sort of really understand the importance of heart intelligence. And as Mansi was saying, that kind of journey down into your heart. And we have a brain in our heart. So there's an institute called the Heart Math Institute, and they have been studying heart coherence, like full body coherence, but the intelligence of our heart, and actually how a lot of our sort of decisions are made actually in our heart before they go to our brain. And it's really quite fascinating. And so through coming into space, I realized that, you know, you can provide all kinds of spaces in the world. And so I started this podcast called The Future is Beautiful, which is formed around a book, a whole creative activism project that I started 10 years ago. And then we had this book, which was formed around the question, what is the future you choose? And the idea around this was that each one of us is creating the future through how we spend our time, money, and energy. And so if we actually have that ability to tap into ourselves and to, it's almost like we're all carrying like this blueprint, like in our souls, that can guide us to a beautiful future. And if we're able to actually kind of see through all of the inner mess and the external mess and tap into that part of ourselves, and this is where yoga really comes in, then we can we can actually be fully showing up in our way and bringing that thread into the fabric. And so with The Future is Beautiful, I host conversations on the podcast and explore this weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability, and how through speaking in a different way, through really listening, and as we're sitting here with, you know, everything that's been happening in the last few weeks with Black Lives Matters, for example, like a big part of what's opened up there is how we need to listen, and it's not just like it's listening to others, like listening to maybe people that are different to us, but it's also listening to parts of ourselves that we don't normally give space for, and listening to earth, listening to nature, and so through that process of deep listening. And again, this is a skill that you acquire. It's an innate skill that we have, but it's not something that is nurtured through our education and our societal systems in actually all countries, because now most countries have the Western education system, and so we kind of have a big process of unlearning in order to find the natural skills that we have, such as the ability to listen deeply. And so I feel like that is one of a part of us that can really lead us towards a beautiful future. And there's so much more I can say, but I will leave it there. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you so much, Amisha. Honestly, your energy is, like everyone on the panel, your energy is very touching, but also to bring forward that full picture of self-mastery as a form of success, and that yoga is a lifelong process and continuous. And most importantly, you're touching on heart intelligence and making that relevant, that it's also a discipline that's being studied, the idea of heart coherence. I'm particularly touched as well about the idea of blueprints for a beautiful future that we can all carry in all of us. And I hope everyone on this panel will be excited to listen to your podcast. I'm certainly going to be one of them. So thank you very much for that. I'm really delighted to have hosted such a diverse panel here today. I think everyone has demonstrated the relevance of why yoga is important, either through sharing their thoughts, sharing actual feeling and physicality, sharing their experience, their wisdom, and sharing their history and their journey. It's really been incredible and demonstrates its relevance. I'm really heartened that we are really seeing the point of yoga and spirituality as part of the universe that we live in, and it can inhabit all parts of the world. So it's not merely, you know, a space to go to after work. It can infuse work, whether you're in business, as both Mansi and Amisha do, with a kind of soulful entrepreneurship, whether it's working in multilateral fora, or whether it's indeed in academia, as we heard from Bharti Chhibber. Jeffrey Sachs, who was formerly with the World Bank and is now leading a center at the Columbia University, in fact, leads something called Spirituality and Sustainability. And so we are seeing spirituality to become mainstreamed. And I hope that part of the energy of the 21st century will actually be bringing these principles of heart intelligence, Amisha's reference to our own blueprints, getting rid of the chaos and thinking of our own blueprints. And together, I think the future can only be beautiful. So thank you very much.